everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I am very excited to discuss something that I think is going to lead to a lot of interesting conversation and maybe possibly a little bit of expanding of ideas, and that is, can you have two masters? Now, I don't want to steal credit for this idea. This is actually something that I saw on Brittany Simon's Tumblr page, funnily enough, where she had gotten an ask from somebody with this exact question. And oftentimes in BDSM, and at least as an educator, I get very many questions from people who are basically asking, can it be a dominant, can it be a switch, can it be a submissive, can it be a this or that, or this and that? And almost all of those can be answered with some variation on yes, so long as you have the consent of the people you would want to be doing this with, and depending on your own personal life circumstances. But what I found with this question, with can I have two masters, is it was less clear-cut than that, both in Brittany's response and in just people's general reaction to the question. It was not so much that it was up to the individual person, but rather was this something that was even possible in the first place? So what I want to do today is dive into that question, go into kind of the background, my thinking on it, how I interpret that kind of question beyond just the literal words, and some ways that this may or may not be able to work out. So the general premise of the knee-jerk reaction to this question is, why would you be able to have two masters? You can't have people telling you to turn left and one telling you to turn right. What are you going to do in that situation? And I can kind of see that perspective from the idea that most of us have about what being a master is. At least in America, the term master is very much linked to leather culture, which is in turn the core of the BDSM world in the United States. And there are a lot of social and cultural connotations that go along with the term master that imply that somebody who uses that term for themselves, or somebody who refers to wanting a master, is seeking a 24/7 total power exchange dynamic. So the power is always complete and it is always on. And if we take it from just that one definition of what being a master is, yes, obviously it is so complicated as to maybe not be outright impossible, but to be highly improbable you would find a dynamic where that would work. Masters oftentimes, and D-types in general, are this way. They can have strong wills, they can very much be my way or the highway, and so oftentimes they may not be necessarily good team players, and especially in total power exchange dynamics, having two people whose word is absolute authority creates conflict, because inherently there will be times where a compromise will need to be reached and one may need to acquiesce to the other, which can create cracks in the whole total power exchange framework when one has to subsume their will for another. I think that is a completely valid interpretation. However, I would like to expand how we consider the term master when somebody's asking this question, because most people are not really looking for a 24/7 total power exchange dynamic. That is one snowflake on one tip of the giant iceberg that is BDSM. That is such a minority within the community. It's not that many at all, especially if you're considering the whole world of BDSM, not just in the United States. Many people use the term master simply because it is a hot title and it makes sense for their relationship. And I know in past videos that I've made, I have been very adamant that the term master has a specific meaning. And while I don't necessarily retract that statement, I think just as I become more aware of the nuances in the BDSM world and more accepting of that, I still want people to respect and understand, especially if they're in America, that there are those specific cultural and social connotations that they should be aware of, because it can impact publicly how people are going to assume your relationship works. But if you are just in your own private relationship, if you are just doing what makes you and your partner happy, I don't see any reason why you couldn't use the term master to describe any other DS dynamic. I know many people who are pets, for example, that use the term master. I know many people who are service bottoms or service submissives that use the term master because it makes the most sense with the role play, even if they are not literally in a 24/7 total power exchange dynamic. So I think what people are really getting at when they ask this question is not so much literally, can I have two 24/7 total power exchange dynamics, but am I able to have two simultaneous power exchange dynamics in general? And when you expand it to this degree, which maybe you disagree with, which is fine, but for me, when I break it down that way, when I'm really answering this from the perspective of, can anybody who is a submissive have two power exchange dynamic partners who are dominant? I think the answer turns into more of a yes. It's a yes with a big caveat to it, which is that there are a lot higher needs for communication. There's going to be opportunities for compromise. There's going to be opportunities for conflict, and you need to be prepared for that to happen. But compromise and conflict is not entirely avoided just by having one dominant partner, because the submissive and the dominant will probably have conflicts anyway. There will be conflicts about interpretations of the rules, administration of punishment, about the types of scenes that are happening. There will be situations anyways where some kind of compromise will need to happen between the people within the power exchange dynamic. So now that we kind of understand how I interpret this question, I want to go into some ways that I think would be possible suggestions for how to make this type of relationship work. The first way that I think about this is where somebody has two dominant partners, neither of which are 24/7 and neither of which are total power exchange. This is sort of like having two bedroom-only dynamics. However, I find that can be a little bit of a derisive terminology, so suffice to say that it is really any dynamic that does not extend into everyday life and does not have complete authority over the submissive. I think this is the easiest to navigate if you've never been in this type of relationship before, because setting up boundaries in these types of relationships are very clear, especially if you're going with a type of dynamic where the rules are only in place when you are literally with that person. So if you're seeing person A and they have their set of rules, and then you go see person B and they have their set of rules, then there's no opportunity for those to conflict, because neither one of them can impose rules that would be in place after the person has already left their space and gone somewhere else. 24/7 in and of itself could be a little bit of a tricky term, because can you have a 24/7 dynamic where can you have something that's not a 24/7 dynamic where rules extend into things beyond just outside of the bedroom, let's say? Maybe. I can kind of see an argument for that, but suffice to say, in this model, simplest form is having people where person A has rules in place when you're with them, person B has rules when you're with them, and neither the two shall meet. Now, there is a possibility for conflict here if you decide that you want to go as a triad somewhere, or you want to do a co-topping scene, in which case, as with anything else, you would negotiate with all of the people involved to make sure that everybody's on the same page, to make sure that everybody's gonna have all of their limits be all hunky-dory and all of that good negotiation stuff. And as long as everybody can consent to it, I really don't see as big a potential for world-shattering conflict as you might in a dynamic that involves two 24/7 total power exchange dominants. But we'll talk about a possibility for that one later. The next situation I want to discuss is when you have a dominant partner who has a 24/7 dynamic and one that does not. This one requires a little bit more tweaking and definitely a lot more advanced negotiation than the first way, but I still think it's perfectly possible. Because basically what you have to do is you outline, okay, these are the ways the non-24/7 partner, this is how they're going to fit into my life with room for growth and all of that, but ideally, what do I want from this dynamic? And basically negotiate, okay, here are ways where the 24/7 dynamic may come into play when I'm with you, or ways that it won't. And ideally, there should be such a compromise where 24/7 rules should not negatively affect the other partner's ability to have their own dynamic with the partner, and where the submissive won't have to choose between having one or the other. So for example, if one dominant, the 24/7 dominant, has a rule where the submissive has to call them at 5:30 every single day after work for a 30-minute phone call, and the other dominant wants to do a scene with them starting at 5:15 that involves wearing a ball gag for half an hour, that is obviously going to create a conflict. So you need to have advanced negotiation about that, and ideally you have rules around the 24/7 dynamic where there is a temporary pause during times when the submissive partner is with the other dominant, so that way each relationship gets to have its own space. Now, the third possibility is where you have two dominants, both of which have 24/7 control, but neither of them have total power exchange. I particularly see this working out where the power exchange is primarily focused around a training aspect. So that would be something where the submissive is being trained in a particular skill or to learn a certain thing. But really what it breaks down to is more about each partner having their own separate spheres of influence. So for example, you could have one partner who is 24/7 and they are more of a caregiver type. They are the ones who are establishing things like bedtime and homework and chores. And then you have another dominant that is more of a sexual presence in your life where they get to control your orgasms, or you have to ask them permission before you come, or some other things like that. And as long as these spheres are sufficiently separated from each other, and again, you have that good advanced negotiation, you can have a dynamic like this that actually works out pretty well. And in particular, if you are somebody who is in a long distance relationship, it can be very difficult for one partner to fulfill all of your kink needs or all of your fantasies. And so it makes sense to have multiple partners where one person is able to provide to you in a certain way, and another partner you provide to in a different way. And this is not to say that this is not going to be without conflict, because again, conflict is possible in any BDSM relationship. But as long as you are doing those negotiations, you are having check-ins, and as long as you don't have it where like one partner is trying to subtly take away from power from the other, I think this is definitely something that can work out. Now, the fourth and final way, to me, is I think the most interesting one to talk about, and is possibly also the one that I think is set up for the most long-term success. And that is where you have two people who are co-dominants together. You have a master and a mistress, a sir and a ma'am, or two sirs or two ma'ams, or whatever title they happen to want to use. But the point is that they work together as a team to present almost like a front of dominance to the submissive. In some ways, this can be very parental, so maybe it works as a mommy and a daddy dom together with one submissive partner, or several, I guess. Doesn't really matter for this example. But it's something where both are in sync with each other and both are working together to develop rules and check-ins and structure and punishments, and not necessarily co-topping every scene, but at least being on the same page, so that way you don't have overlap where one person wants to do a whipping and another person says, oh, well, I want to do a flogging, but now the submissive is too tired, so I guess I won't have my needs met. It can happen, but with this dynamic, I think there is the most possibility, especially to the greatest extent when the two dominants have their kinks very well aligned and they have their dominant style very well aligned. This can be something that I think is very sustainable, and it can be something that works particularly well in polydynamics. It does not have to be a sexual dynamic. It doesn't have to be a romantic dynamic. But when you do have some kind of stronger bond, either of friendship or romance or what have you, binding these things together, I think it can create a very wonderful, very coordinated dynamic where especially one dominant is not being pressured to be everything all of the time. And I think this is one of the major reasons why doms get very burnt out on being dominant, or why they find it hard to kind of always tap into their dominant headspace, is because it is very emotionally taxing for a lot of people to be expected to be in their dominant headspace all the time. But when you can have a dynamic where you are sort of divvying up the relationship responsibilities and you can have those conversations dominant to dominant about who is going to be the one to do the punishment tonight, who is going to be the one who checks in on the rules, who is going to be the one to make sure that XYZ thing is getting taken care of. You can have those separation of responsibilities in a way that is still honoring both people's authority within the relationship while also giving the other person a break to maybe do other life things. If you have one partner that you are in a 24/7 total power exchange relationship with, and suddenly they have a really big thing at work come up and they need to be at a conference for 3 days, or they're sick or something else happens, you have another partner there who can support their authority and maintain it while also making sure that the submissive is having that consistent structure, having all of those good BDSM feels still going on while allowing for space for the other person to take care of their own life stuff. Now, this one is very dependent upon everybody's personalities involved, but again, I think it can work, and I think it can be something that is really fulfilling, and I think it really also goes into a lot of archetypes about like having a mistress and a mister with like a slave underneath them, and that can be kind of problematic and unicorn hunty, but it doesn't always have to be that way. But anyways, those are pretty much my suggestions for how I would think that a potential two dominant partner situation might work. I am sure there are many possibilities that I was unable to list here or simply didn't think of. I don't want anybody to think this is like a complete list, and I don't want anybody to think that this is the only way of doing it. These things, everything in BDSM very much depends on your personal preferences, your personality, your limits, your boundaries, your expectations, and your partner's expectations, limits, boundaries, preferences, needs, etc., etc., etc. So this may not work for everybody. Not everybody's submission or dominance works in this fashion. But for the right person, for the right personality type, I think these types of relationships can work. Now, you may or may not be using the term master, but I think we should think beyond that. And if we are, I think these are some potential solutions. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. Hopefully you found this interesting and helpful. Please leave me your thoughts and comments down below. I would love to hear what you think about this subject. If you have any suggestions for me on videos you'd like to see, please let me know down in the comment section below as well. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week. And as well, if you'd like to support my channel, if you really enjoy my work, the best place to do that is over on Patreon. I have tons of exclusive perks and rewards and videos and photo shoots and all kinds of fun things. So if you haven't already checked that out, please do. And if you have, thank you so much for choosing to support me. If you do, it means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.